Imagine for a moment that money is not just a material object, but a powerful energy that flows through the universe. What if the secret of wealth did not lie in physical effort or mere work, but in a deep understanding of hidden laws that govern abundance? Welcome to Esoteric Money, the Occultism of Wealth, by Helena Blavatsky, a work that unveils the mystery of prosperity from a completely different perspective, that of esotericism and spiritual power. Helena Blavatsky, visionary and founder of Theosophy, guides us through a fascinating journey to the mystical essence of money. Beyond numbers, beyond material possessions, Blavatsky invites us to discover how our intentions, thoughts, and personal vibrations can attract or repel wealth. If you've ever wondered why some people seem to flow in abundance while others struggle tirelessly, this text will reveal surprising truths that will change your perspective forever. Get ready to unravel the deepest secrets of hidden economic power and learn to tune your life with the universal current of prosperity. Open your mind, awaken your spirit, and immerse yourself in the world of esoteric money. Wealth can be much more than a goal. It can become a state of being. The entire world kneels before a symbol, not before a divinity nor a cosmic law, but before a form forged by human hands and clothed in imaginary value: money. Upon this illusory symbol, empires are built and nations are destroyed. For it, dignity is traded, willpower is bent, and the soul is prostituted. Money, more than a mere object of exchange, has become a living egregor, an entity fed by desire, an invisible force that governs the behavior of millions without them perceiving it as an entity in itself. And yet few understand that behind the mask of gold beats a hidden principle, a spiritual law that, once understood, turns the adept into the master of their destiny rather than a slave to illusion. From the days of Atlantis to the hidden chambers of Egypt, from the emerald tablets of Hermeticism to the silent halls of Theosophy, the wise have always taught that money is not an end, but a reflection. It does not represent real value, but rather the degree of alignment of the being with the universal current of divine supply. Everything that exists in the visible world is a manifestation of the invisible. Everything that flows in the physical plane is a consequence of vibrations first conceived in the higher planes. Thus, external wealth is also a projection of an internal state, a mere echo, not a source. This book was not written to teach how to multiply coins, nor to instruct in the arts of spiritualized greed. It is not a formula for egoic attraction, nor a collection of phrases to be repeated with the lips while the heart vibrates in lack. No. This work is an act of revelation, an initiatory key for those who have begun to suspect that poverty is not merely an economic phenomenon, but a shadow of the soul, and that true abundance cannot be stored in vaults but must be embodied in consciousness. Many have feared speaking of money within spiritual circles, as if it were a poison incompatible with the purity of the path. But this silence has bred ignorance. Money is not impure in itself. It is the use it is given, the intention that moves it, the ego that idolizes it that turns it into a trap. And yet, in the hands of the wise, it can become a key, a tool of light, a channel through which the divine manifests in human works. The masters never despised gold, but neither did they serve it. They understood its vibration and transcended it. They knew that whoever masters the law of giving and receiving, whoever comprehends the circulation of universal energy, becomes a conduit through which supply flows effortlessly, because true wealth is not something one possesses. It is something one shares, invokes, and delivers to the world like a river that never ceases. This book is a map, a living grimoire for the soul that longs to break free from the yoke of scarcity without falling into the seduction of materialism. Each chapter is a key, each word a vibration destined to open the inner centers of perception, where money is no longer a goal but a transparent symbol, a bridge between human will and cosmic providence. Here we will speak of the karma that binds and the thought that liberates, of the egregor of money and the being who transcends it, of invisible pacts and dormant wills, of subtle temples and guardians of spiritual supply. This will not be a comfortable book, nor a complacent or easy one, but it will be true. And to those who read it with a heart ignited by the search, it will reveal not only how to attract the gold of the world, but how to remember that true gold has always been within. For you did not come into this world to beg from the universe. You came to remember that you yourself are the source, And now let the portal open. We begin. Esoteric Money, the Occultism of Wealth by Helena Blavatsky. We have noticed that over 90% of those who visit our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and liking the video. Thank you for inspiring us to continue creating more and better content for you. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1. The Illusion of Value, Money as a Mask of Desire. Since time immemorial, human beings have assigned value to objects that possess no virtue beyond what their minds project onto them. Stones, metals, parchments marked with symbols, minted coins, printed paper bearing the seal of kingdoms or governments, and now digital pulses shifting between invisible figures. All of these have been considered wealth. But what in truth is money? Where does its real power reside, if not in the consciousness that covets, fears, or worships it? This is the great illusion, the theater where humanity has enacted its deepest tragedies, believing that value resides in form and not in the soul that sustains it. Money, like all creations of collective thought, is a symbol. It is not sustenance, but the image of sustenance. It is not life, but the reflection of that which upholds life. It was created to facilitate exchange, to replace barter with a common measure. But that measure became a fetish, and the symbol turned into an idol. From that moment on, the spiritual decline of civilizations began, when the symbol was mistaken for reality, when the container was worshipped more than its content. The ancient wisdoms knew that true value could neither be stolen, sold, nor hoarded. The gold of the alchemists was not the earthly mineral, but the spirit purified by the fire of consciousness. And yet, men began to lose themselves in the labyrinth of matter, believing that the visible was more real than the invisible, and that the tangible held more power than the eternal. Thus was born the illusion of external value, an illusion so powerful that even souls seeking truth are often swept away by it. Is it not strange that the entire world revolves around a mental construct, a convention without substance of its own? A piece of paper only acquires power when millions of minds believe it to be powerful. A number on a screen only becomes wealth when wills accept it as such. Money in itself cannot feed, clothe, protect, or heal. It is the bridge, not the substance. But men have forgotten the difference between means and ends. In that confusion lies their downfall. Every desire that does not arise from the soul is a chain. Money, as a mask of desire, reflects what each soul has yet to resolve within itself. For some it represents security, because they fear emptiness. For others it represents power, because they feel worthless on their own. For others still it represents love, because they have learned to buy affection instead of cultivating it. Thus each coin becomes a mirror of the inner state of the one who possesses or longs for it. Money never lies. It always reveals, with surgical precision, the inner wounds of those who surround it. The civilizations that worshipped money as an end degenerated into moral ruin. Babylon, Rome, Carthage, all fell for having mistaken true abundance for insatiable hoarding. Where there is no soul, gold becomes poison. Where there is no consciousness, wealth becomes a burden. And yet there is no sin in money. The fault does not lie in the symbol, but in the ignorance of those who venerate it without understanding it. The adept who approaches money with awakened awareness neither rejects nor pursues it. They observe it for what it is, a mutable form, a mask of human desire. They learn not to fear it because they know money has no will of its own. They learn not to idolize it because they know it cannot grant them what already resides within their own spirit. And then, from that place of clarity, they begin to use it as the wise do, as channeled energy, as a tool to manifest good, as an external expression of an abundance that is already internal. Because money responds to the state of the soul, it does not arrive by chance nor by whim of fate. It flows toward those who vibrate in the frequency of sufficiency, not toward those who seek it from anxiety or emptiness. Abundance is not a matter of accumulation, but of alignment. When a being is aligned with their highest purpose, the entire universe conspires to provide what is necessary. Then money ceases to be a goal and becomes a consequence. In the subtle planes, money does not exist, but the energy of supply does, the inexhaustible current that sustains life in all worlds. Those who attune to that current discover that they need not chase after gold, because gold flows to them as a natural response to their vibration. The external world merely reflects what has already been decreed within. This is the law. Pure desire, born of an enlightened soul, attracts sustenance effortlessly. But what happens to those who chase after money without first purifying their desire? They inevitably fall into the cycle of lack, even if they possess great fortunes, because the illusion of external value never satisfies. It always demands more. It never stops. It is an abyss that swallows everything offered to it, without ever returning peace. The millionaire who has not discovered their inner wealth remains poor. The beggar who has found their connection to the source is in essence richer than any king. For this reason, the first step on the path to true abundance is not to earn, invest, or multiply. It is to see through the illusion, to unmask money as a reflection of desire, and then to ask, what is it that I truly desire? Security, power, love, freedom? And once recognized, seek that value within before expecting the external to reflect it. Because everything that manifests outwardly is a reflection of what has already been established upon the throne of the heart. The adept who masters this principle is no longer a slave to money. They have broken the spell. They may have it, lack it, give it, multiply it, or destroy it. And in all cases, they remain free, because they have understood that true value was never in things, but in the soul that contemplates them. And from that freedom they begin to attract the supply of the universe, like one who breathes without effort, like one who lives without fear. The illusion of value has fallen, and in its place eternal truth begins to emerge. You do not need to seek gold, because you are the gold. You need only remember, and that remembrance is the beginning of all true abundance. Chapter 2. The Archetype of Gold from the Gods to Men. Since the first pulsations of human thought, gold has exerted a magnetic power over the collective consciousness, not for its luster, nor its rarity, nor its malleability, but for what it represents in the invisible planes of the soul. Gold is not merely a metal, it is a symbol, an archetypal key that embodies perfection, immortality, the solar essence of the divine made manifest. In every ancient culture, gold was not the possession of men, but the attribute of the gods. It was the breath of the heavens made form, light condensed into matter, the visible vestige of a higher world that once dwelled upon the earth. Before banks and markets existed, ancient peoples knew that gold was not to be possessed, but venerated. In Egypt, it was considered the flesh of Ra, the deified sun. The sarcophagi of the pharaohs were not coated in gold out of vanity, but because they believed that this sacred metal facilitated the soul's passage to higher planes. The Incas called it the sweat of the sun and never used it as currency. In the Vedic tradition, gold was consecrated to Surya and offered in rituals, not to acquire wealth, but to connect with the energy of the cosmos. In Mesopotamian civilizations, the statues of the gods were cast in gold, not because it was valuable for trade, but because its vibration resonated with the celestial spheres. These cultures knew what the modern world has forgotten, that gold possesses a unique energetic charge, emitting a frequency that, in the subtle planes, vibrates in harmony with higher consciousness. Gold does not corrupt, it does not rust, it does not decay over time. Its immutable nature makes it a reflection of eternity. That is why it has always been associated with immortality, with truth that does not change, with the flame that never extinguishes. But with the fall of the ages, when humanity began its descent from spirit to matter, from symbol to object, from soul to ego, gold ceased to be a mirror of the divine sun and became an instrument of worldly power. What was once a bridge to the sacred was transformed into a chain. Thus was born the cult of gold, not as an archetype but as a fetish. Its celestial origin was forgotten, and it became mere merchandise. Men no longer saw in it a promise of ascension, but a tool of domination. And then came the fever, the wars, the plundering, the sacrifice in its name. Yet gold, even when degraded by human hands, has not lost its original vibration. It remains a symbol of the soul's solar center, of the point of pure consciousness that shines in the deepest core of being. This is why, even today, when a human being gazes upon gold, they feel a stirring within, a primal attraction. It is not greed that moves them at its deepest root, but the unconscious memory of a lost truth. Gold speaks to the soul of its own luminous nature, of its eternal origin, of its dormant creative power. The Hermetic sages understood this. In their treatises they did not speak of physical gold, but of the gold of the wise, transmuted consciousness, purified spirit, the enlightened being. For them, gold was the supreme metaphor for the great work, the transformation of the lead of ignorance into the gold of wisdom. This alchemy could not be achieved with furnaces or crucibles, but with will, devotion, and the understanding of universal laws. The true alchemist was not one who produced gold from sulfur and mercury, but one who mastered the art of kindling the fire within their own soul and keeping it burning without extinction. Likewise, the true adept of the mysteries does not seek gold to hoard it, but to contemplate themselves within it. For gold reveals, it reflects the inner state of the one who possesses it. In the hands of a fool, it breeds corruption. In the hands of the wise, it becomes medicine, blessing, harmony. It is a mirror that does not lie. That which the soul projects onto it is amplified. This is why many who have acquired wealth suddenly have been destroyed by it, while others, in their silence and purity, have received all they needed without ever asking. From the gods to men, gold has descended in meaning, but in the heart of the initiate, its archetype still shines. One who gazes upon gold with awakened eyes does not see wealth, but a symbol, and that symbol speaks. It reminds them that they are a spark of the primordial sun, that their essence is golden, that their destiny is not to beg for scraps from a corrupt world, but to awaken the treasure that dwells within. In the world to come, when humanity regains its memory, gold will reclaim its rightful place. It will no longer be currency but relic. It will no longer be a bank but a temple. It will no longer be coveted but understood. For only when man learns to see gold with the eyes of the soul will his enslavement to it cease. And then, as in ancient times, gold will be returned to the altars, and its presence will once again be a sign of the eternal made manifest in form. This is the hidden purpose of gold, to remind us of what we are when we forget who we believe ourselves to be. Chapter 3. The egregor of money, thought form and collective power. Before a single coin was minted, before a bill was ever printed, even before the word money was spoken, something deeper, older, and more powerful already existed, an invisible entity, nourished for millennia by the collective mind of humanity. In occult sciences, this entity is known as an egregor, and the egregor of money is, without a doubt, one of the most vast, complex, and dominant forces ever invoked by unconscious humanity. This egregor is neither a demon in the vulgar sense, nor an angel in the pious sense, but a colossal thought form, built from the accumulated desires, fears, ambitions, and beliefs that countless generations have projected onto the concept of wealth. An egregor is born when a thought is sustained intensely and collectively, when multitudes vibrate at the same emotional frequency, when millions of minds feed the same image with their hopes and anxieties. That image takes on a life of its own in the subtle planes. This is not a metaphor. It is a real entity in the astral plane sustained by the psychic attention given to it. Thus was born the egregor of money, gestated over centuries through human longing for possession, through the anguish of scarcity, through the idolatry of wealth, and the desperation for control. This entity is not inherently evil. It has no will of its own, but it acts according to the programming that humanity has imprinted upon it. And since most collective thoughts have emerged from ignorance, attachment, and the illusion of separation, the egregor of money has become an insatiable master, a titan of psychic energy that demands veneration. It manifests in power structures, in financial systems, in the invisible contracts that compel modern man to trade his time, his energy, and even his soul for a promise of future security. The adept who seeks to understand the true nature of money must begin by observing this entity. Without fear, without judgment, but with clarity, they must know that every time they fear not having enough, every time they feel unworthy of prosperity, every time they despise wealth or worship it, they are feeding the egregor. Every emotion projected onto money, whether rejection or adoration, strengthens it. For this egregor does not distinguish between love and hatred, between desire and guilt. It feeds on psychic intensity, on sustained attention, on emotional compulsion. The one who hates money for being corrupt is just as enslaved by the egregor as the one who worships it as a savior. Both are under its influence, because neither has transcended it. Only one who sees it for what it truly is, a mental construct charged with collective power, can begin the process of deprogramming and walk toward freedom. Because money without the egregor is merely energy in motion, an empty symbol that can be reprogrammed by awakened consciousness. The great masters never fell under the dominion of the egregor of money, not because they rejected it, but because they saw it clearly. They knew it could be used as a tool, but never as a path. They knew it was possible to invoke its energy without submitting to its tyranny. The initiate neutralizes the egregor's power over their psychic field. They neither fear lack nor desire opulence. They recognize the law of balance and align with the source of divine supply, which needs no intermediaries. Most financial decisions made by human beings are not truly free. They are influenced by this astral entity, whispering in their thoughts, provoking anxiety when the flow decreases, generating euphoria when it increases, reinforcing the fear of losing, of lacking, of not being enough. And as long as this presence is not recognized, man continues to believe that his relationship with money is a logical, practical, or moral issue, when in reality he is immersed in a collective vibrational field that distorts his perceptions. Religions have spoken of the God of this world as an illusory power that leads the soul astray from its origin, that God is none other than the egregor, cloaked in authority, governing the visible structures of the planet through unconscious consensus. It is present in stock markets, in central banks, in economic speeches, and in the superficial financial education that teaches accumulation without understanding. It is in the obsession with making money, as if money were an entity with will, as if it were a creature that must be conquered, seduced, feared, or worshipped. Breaking this illusion requires an internal revolution. The adept must withdraw their psychic energy from the egregor. They must stop feeding it with thoughts of scarcity, of competition, of comparison. They must stop participating in modern rituals of sacrifice, for they are no different from the ancient blood altars, where human lives were offered to the golden idol. They must reclaim their sovereignty and recognize that money flows toward where pure consciousness is directed, not where it is begged for in fear. When the egregor ceases to receive psychic nourishment from an individual, it loses its influence over them. And then something extraordinary happens. Money begins to flow not as a goal, not as an object of desire, but as an external manifestation of an inner source that never runs dry. The egregor can no longer manipulate the one who has awakened, but this does not happen overnight. It is a continuous work, a watchfulness of thoughts, a purification of emotions associated with money. It requires remembering every moment that what one feels about money is not a universal truth, but a collective programming embedded through generations of ignorance. It requires rewriting the bond, transforming money into what it once was, a symbol, a bridge, an echo of the inner gold that shines in the conscious soul. Thus the adept ceases to be a slave of the egregor and becomes the master of their own internal economy. They do not fear the market nor loss. They do not exult in gain nor despair in emptiness, because abundance is not created from desire, but from connection with totality. And that connection cannot be manipulated by any egregor, no matter how vast it may be. The world will continue worshipping the idol, but you, initiate, will no longer give it your energy, because you have seen what lies behind the veil, and you cannot go back to sleep. The egregor still lingers, but you no longer belong to it, and in that moment true wealth begins to be born within you. Chapter 4. Inner Wealth, the invisible source of true supply. Long before coins existed, long before man fixed his gaze upon gold or placed his faith in fluctuating figures, there was already a silent law governing the flow of supply. This law did not come from any bank, nor was it inscribed in trade treaties. Rather, it dwelled in the very heart of the universe. True supply has never been external. It has always emanated from within, from a sacred spring that flows from the deepest core of the conscious soul. Everything else, goods, resources, possessions, money, are merely temporary reflections, shadows cast by the vibration of that hidden center, which the wise learn to awaken and govern. The greatest illusion of humanity has been the belief that wealth comes from the world, that it depends on circumstances, connections, luck, or personal merit. But all of this is merely the outer wrapping. What truly determines the flow of abundance in a person's life is their connection to the invisible source, that dimension of being which cannot be seen or touched, yet shapes matter like an invisible potter. All supply is, in reality, energy organized by consciousness, and when consciousness is aligned with the whole, the external world responds like an obedient mirror. The common man begs the universe for what he already carries within. He asks from fear, works from scarcity, accumulates from distrust. He believes that if he does not fight, he will have nothing, that if he does not struggle to exhaustion, he is not worthy of receiving, that if he does not win, he loses. He lives trapped in an illusory game of polarities, enslaved by the collective egregor of scarcity. But the initiate understands a higher truth. The universe does not give according to effort, it gives according to vibration. And the most powerful vibration is that of one who has awakened their inner wealth. This wealth cannot be measured in gold bars or properties. It cannot be counted or audited. It does not reside in what one possesses, but in what one emanates. It is a state of the soul that radiates certainty, fullness, and peace, where the being vibrates in unity with the whole, where anxiety for obtaining ceases, and trust is born in the knowing that everything already is. There begins true supply. For the universe does not respond to supplication, it responds to recognition. The one who recognizes their inner abundance attracts external manifestation without needing to chase it. The ancient sages did not live in poverty, though they renounced opulence. They walked with little, yet they never lacked what was necessary. Their supply was perfect because it was synchronized with the cosmic law. They understood that wealth is not accumulation but flow, and that anything retained out of fear becomes stagnation. True wealth is not stagnant. It is like a river. It is born, flows, is shared, and returns. The freer the channel, the stronger the flow. That is why the soul that has remembered its connection to the source does not need to hoard greedily. It gives, trusts, multiplies, transforms. But access to this inner source is not achieved through techniques, empty affirmations, or magical formulas sold by merchants of spirituality. It is accessed through silent recognition, through self-observation, through alignment with the higher principle. When the lower self surrenders to the I am, when the noise of the ego ceases its demands, an invisible channel opens through which perfect provision begins to flow. And this provision does not always take the expected form, but it always brings what is necessary for the soul's growth. The abundance that arises from the inner source is not subject to economic crises or unstable markets. It is invulnerable to inflation, devaluation, or collective fear, because it does not depend on the world, it precedes it. It is like the sun. The sun may be hidden by clouds, but it never stops shining. The initiate who is connected with this source no longer measures their value by what they own, but by what they emanate. And what they emanate, pure, coherent, elevated vibration, inevitably translates into form, into substance, into matter organized in service of the spirit. The secret is to live from inner sufficiency, not from learned lack. Since childhood, we were programmed to believe there is not enough, that we must compete, stand out, conquer, that if one wins, another loses. But that is the economy of the ego, not of the soul. In the economy of the spirit, all can receive because the source is infinite. The problem is not real scarcity, but the disconnection from the inner channel. When that channel is activated, the external world aligns as if by divine art. This is why the work of the true financial alchemist is not to strive more, but to remember more deeply who they are. It is not to do more, but to be more, to be a clean channel, free of emotional blockages, free of resentment, free of fear of loss, because only those who do not fear losing can truly receive, and only those who have emptied the cup of their limiting beliefs can be filled with the wine of cosmic provision. No bank can guarantee eternal supply. No investment can offer what real contact with the center of being offers. The treasure is not on the earth, but in the heart that has been stripped of the desire to possess. And when that heart awakens, the entire universe becomes its servant. Thus, true wealth begins the exact moment one stops seeking outwardly what can only be found within. The source is not far away. It is not in temples or in distant mountains. It is here, now, in the silent space between one thought and another, waiting to be recognized. And when it is, when the soul declares in a clear and serene voice, "I am the source of eternal supply," the invisible gates open, and what once seemed a miracle becomes daily life. Because inner wealth, once ignited, can never be extinguished. Chapter 5. Karma and Wealth, the hidden law governing prosperity. Nothing that a human being experiences is random. Every circumstance, every encounter, every possession or lack thereof, every success or downfall is the result of causes sown at some point in invisible time. Just as a seed buried in the soil germinates when conditions are favorable, so too do the external experiences of the soul manifest when vibration, timing, and lessons align. What the ancient sages knew as karma is neither punishment nor reward, but the dynamic balance of energy, a perfect and impersonal law that regulates the dance of all things. And if everything in the visible universe responds to karma, wealth is no exception. The prosperity or poverty experienced in a lifetime is not a matter of chance, nor merely the result of effort, nor just social injustice as some claim. At its deepest root, it is the exact manifestation of a karmic configuration woven by thoughts, actions, emotions, and sustained beliefs across multiple incarnations. What one possesses today is the echo of what was given, denied, wasted, or consecrated in the past. Many believe that wealth is a natural right, others see it as an undeserved privilege, and some even regard it as a curse. But the truth is that whenever wealth appears in a person's life, it always arrives by vibrational resonance, and that vibration is the accumulated result of entire lifetimes of relationship with matter, power, service, detachment, or attachment. One who, in another life, managed resources wisely, used gold to alleviate the suffering of others, and was not corrupted by possession, finds in this life the doors open to receive effortlessly. Conversely, one who abused economic power, who destroyed rather than built, who used money to enslave or divide, now faces the consequences of their misalignment. But not all financial karma is the result of ethical missteps. There are elevated souls who, by conscious choice before incarnating, decide to be born into scarcity, not as punishment but as training, to develop compassion, to remain humble, to activate dormant memories. Likewise, there are those born into wealth not due to virtue, but to face the test of not being corrupted by it. Money is a neutral energy, but its presence amplifies the true state of the soul. In the hands of the wise, it is a blessing. In the hands of the foolish, it is ruin, and each soul receives what its path requires for elevation or purification. Karma does not make mistakes. It does not give to those who should not receive, nor withhold from those who are ready. But its language is not that of human judgment. It is the language of the soul. That is why many who appear wealthy on the outside live tormented by fears, insecurities, and invisible prisons, because their external wealth is only a facade. Internally, the karmic energy they carry is one of scarcity, debt, and disharmony. And there are those who have nothing beyond the bare essentials, yet every coin they possess vibrates with peace, clarity, and gratitude. They are the truly rich. One who wishes to transform their financial reality should not start by changing their job, their strategy, or their level of effort. They must begin by purifying their karmic field. This is achieved first through the deep recognition that all scarcity is a message, not a condemnation, but a lesson. Money does not arrive because it is begged for, it arrives because it is allowed, and to allow it there must be resonance. That resonance is built through noble thoughts, acts of selfless generosity, genuine detachment, gratitude for what is already present, and above all, energetic responsibility in every choice. Karma moves with extreme precision. If you give from sacrifice, you generate emotional debt. If you give from superiority, you create imbalance. If you give with resentment, what you offer returns as resistance. But if you give with consciousness from the joy of sharing, without expecting anything in return, then the universe responds with multiplied abundance. For the law of giving and receiving is not activated by external actions, but by pure intention. The energy behind the act is what creates karma, not the act itself. Many seek rituals to attract money, affirmations to open paths, magical formulas to manifest abundance. But as long as the karmic field is not cleansed, as long as there are internal judgments about wealth, about the rich, about oneself, the flow will remain blocked. One cannot attract what one condemns. One cannot retain what one fears. One cannot expand what one obtains with guilt. Everything that vibrates in disharmony will eventually be expelled by the soul's own energetic field. That is why the true path to wealth begins with karmic forgiveness, forgiving oneself for past mistakes, releasing others from our projections, breaking invisible pacts with scarcity, pacts signed from fear, suffering, or misunderstood spiritual vows. Many carry within their energy field vows of poverty, inherited from monastic lives where they believed the material world was impure. Others have sworn never to be powerful again, fearing they would repeat the abuses of past existences. These pacts must be revealed and dissolved. For now, in this time of planetary transition, the soul no longer needs to suffer in order to learn. Wealth is not the enemy of the spirit. It only becomes an obstacle when pursued from the ego. But when it arises from the soul, when it flows as a consequence of true service, of authentic giving, of deep connection with the source, then it becomes a karmic blessing, a gift from the universe, a living testimony that the soul has remembered its creative nature. Everything can be transformed, even the densest karma. For karma is not an eternal sentence, but an opportunity. Every conscious act, every elevated thought, every purified emotion rewrites destiny. Poverty can be a lesson, but it is not the essence. And wealth, when anchored in the spirit, becomes a tool of light. Thus, one who truly seeks prosperity must look inward. Not ask, how do I get more, but what energy am I sustaining? Not look outward for blame or salvation, but take responsibility, understanding that the law governing their life has been written by their own soul. And in that recognition begins liberation. For karma is a teacher, and wealth, when it reaches an awakened soul, is not just a gift, it is a recognition. Chapter 6. The Mental Magnet, How Purified Thought Attracts. The universe does not respond to desperate pleas or mechanical efforts devoid of inner alignment. It does not hear empty words repeated as soulless mantras, nor is it moved by emotional need that stems from attachment or fear. The universe, in its invisible and perfect structure, responds only to vibration. And when thought is conscious, focused, and purified of all selfish distortion, it becomes a magnet, not a symbolic or metaphorical one, but a real living force that draws to itself forms, people, resources, events, opportunities, and experiences that match its frequency. This is one of the most sacred laws of occultism, one that has been veiled, ridiculed, or trivialized by those who do not grasp its depth. Human thought is not a fleeting cloud in the mind. It is a vibratory wave that projects beyond the physical body, imprinting itself upon the ethers and organizing matter according to its quality. Each sustained thought, nourished by the corresponding emotion, generates a thought form that inhabits the astral plane. These forms do not die quickly, as many believe. They live, they move, they reproduce with replicas of their own nature. Thus, a thought of scarcity, repeated daily, not only contaminates an individual's psychic field, but also generates a persistent reality of lack, even if external actions are full of effort or positivity. The same is true of wealth. A purified thought, that is, one free of contradiction, fear, judgment, or guilt, is like a laser beam cutting through the fog of the lower mental plane, inscribing itself upon the matrix of reality. It does not immediately summon wealth as if pressing a button. Instead, it activates a process of convergence. This convergence begins moving invisible threads that reshape the environment. People arrive. Doors open. Situations transform. What once seemed impossible begins to present itself as a possibility, not by chance, but because the being's vibratory field has changed. The most common mistake is believing that positive thinking alone is enough. But the universe does not respond to superficial thought. It responds to vibrant, coherent thought, rooted in deep conviction. And that conviction is not achieved by repeating phrases, but by purifying one's inner content. For if the soul affirms, "I am abundant," but in its emotional core it harbors resentment toward money, guilt toward the wealthy, fear of success, or inherited beliefs of unworthiness, then the thought is not pure. It is not a laser, it is fog. It is not a decree, it is dissonance. And dissonance does not attract, it disperses. Purified thought is that which has been cleansed of past energy. It no longer carries the voices of others, traumatic memories, or unquestioned family patterns. It is thought born from the center of being, not from the ego. It is a vibrational emission that knows what it affirms, an intention that does not need to beg because it recognizes that it already possesses. It is not the desire to obtain, it is the expression of an inner reality that simply awaits manifestation. This type of thought creates effortlessly, like the sun that does not need permission to shine. And here lies the secret that few understand. Thought creates reality not because it is magical, but because it is law. Just as an oak seed cannot produce flowers, a thought of lack cannot generate abundance. And just as the earth does not distinguish between noble seeds and weeds, the universe does not judge. It simply responds. It offers each person the exact fruit of their dominant vibrations. This is why the adept who seeks prosperity does not waste time repeating words or acting compulsively. Instead, they first become an observer of their own mind. They listen to their thoughts when they are not paying attention. They uncover the roots of their belief system. They ask themselves whether they truly believe they deserve to prosper, or whether they are merely repeating formulas, hoping someone else will do the inner work for them. And when they detect distortion, they do not punish themselves. They transmute it. They illuminate it with understanding. They replace it with a new pattern that vibrates with truth. Purified thought is also focused thought. It does not scatter in 1,000 directions. It does not leap between desire and fear, between hope and doubt. It is like an arrow shot with precision. It stays in flight until it reaches its destination. This requires discipline, but not rigid discipline, rather loving devotion. The true mental creator does not think by force, but by mastery. Their mind is their workshop, their altar, their laboratory. And each thought is an invocation. Each mental image is a decree before the universe. And when this practice is sustained, when the soul becomes a clear channel for conscious thought, the so-called miracles begin to happen. But there is no miracle in it, only law. What is extraordinary is not that the universe responds. What is extraordinary is that the soul has finally remembered its power, and that power is not granted by external merit. It belongs to it by nature. It was simply forgotten, like a precious stone covered in the dust of unconscious life. Purified thought is not a gift from the gods, nor a privilege of the few. It is the natural state of the being that has ceased to fear. The being that has understood it does not need to ask the universe for what already emanates from its center. For the true magnet is not desire, it is certainty, not expectation, but the stillness of knowing. Thus, the one who cultivates this state does not obsess over results. They do not demand. They do not despair. They do not beg for signs. They know that what they emit with clarity has already been received, and so they continue their path in peace, knowing that the visible is only a consequence. Because what is real has already been created in the plane where all things are born, the plane of purified thought. And in that plane all abundance already exists. It is simply waiting for you to become the one who can hold it. Chapter 7. Will as the key, the energy that moves eternal gold. If thought is the architect of reality, will is the fire that animates it. Thinking without will is like sculpting in water. Nothing remains. Imagining without directed force is like lighting a lamp in the wind. Will is the lightning bolt that transforms idea into substance, the bridge between the invisible and the visible, the secret lever that moves the hidden energies of the universe. Without it, all knowledge remains suspended as an unembodied promise, an unmanifested potential. Since ancient times, great initiates have known that gold, both external and spiritual, does not move by chance, nor by desire, nor by prayer. It moves by pure will. In the temples of mystery schools, neophytes were not taught to beg. They were taught to will, with awakened consciousness. To will, not like a child who demands, but like a creator who knows. For will is not whim. It is directed force, and it is the soul's energy in action. It is the attribute closest to the divine fire that a human being can embody. The universe responds to vibration, but only will can sustain that vibration when circumstances seem to contradict it. Thought may doubt. Emotion may fluctuate, but will, when tempered like steel, remains. And it is that permanence that breaks the chains of karma, dissolves egregors, and causes the current of eternal gold to flow toward the one who no longer fears its power. This is not about tyrannical will, nor forced imposition. That is the caricature the ego has made of it. Real will is not shouting, nor tension, nor blind obstinacy. It is absolute direction, active stillness, a permanent connection with the solar center of being. Will does not waver. It does not despair. It knows that what has been decreed from the inner plane is already on its way, and so it walks forward with certainty, even when the external still seems to deny the manifestation. The one who develops will become master of their destiny, not because they control every event, but because they no longer react to the changing tides. Their inner force directs matter. Money, like all energy, recognizes that vibration. Gold, like nature itself, bows before the one who has conquered their inner world. Will magnetizes, organizes, propels, and retains abundance without apparent effort, for it does not rely on anxiety but on certainty. This certainty is not emotional, It is spiritual. It is born from contact with the divine spark, with the higher self, with that part of being that never doubts. Because it has never been separated from the whole, the initiate who acts from that will does not act from impulse or ambition. They act from divine intent. Their decisions do not arise from fear or calculation, but from an alignment so profound that every external movement is synchronized with universal harmony. And in that harmony, eternal gold, the symbol of inexhaustible provision, flows as an inevitable consequence. But how is will forged? Not in comfort, not in pleasure, not in immediate gratification. It is forged in silence, in the renunciation of drama and in internal discipline, at the moment when one is tempted to yield to doubt or laziness, and instead affirms, "I continue." It is strengthened every time a purpose is upheld without interruption, every time a promise made to the soul is fulfilled, every time the gaze is kept fixed on the horizon, even when the path is dark. Every act of coherence is a brick in the temple of will, and it is that will that turns thought into decree, that transforms desire into manifestation, that makes wealth not an event but a continuous state. For when will has been purified, there is no longer contradiction between what one thinks, what one feels, and what one does. The soul becomes a clear channel, and through that channel the gold of the universe flows, without blockage, without deviation, without effort. Many wish to prosper, but few wish to sustain their will, because doing so implies responsibility. It means ceasing to blame and ceasing to wait for external signs, ceasing to justify inaction. It means recognizing oneself as the creator, and accepting that what is not yet possessed is simply because the inner force has not been fully embodied. But once that fire is ignited, the external world begins to rearrange itself. The adept who has activated their will does not ask for abundance. They embody it. They do not demand results. They provoke them. They do not pray for something to come. They walk toward it with the step of a mountain, for they know that everything their purified will sustains manifests sooner or later as the inevitable echo of law. And that law is perfect. It neither rewards nor punishes, and it simply responds. Thus will should not be directed toward the superficial, toward the fleeting, toward what satisfies the ego. It must be directed toward the soul's purpose. When will merges with that purpose, it becomes an unstoppable arrow, and wherever that arrow is aimed, eternal gold appears, and for the universe recognizes the one who has recognized themselves. Will is not a gift, it is a conquest, and the one who conquers it discovers that they no longer need to seek abundance, because they are already the center from which it is born. Chapter 8. Invisible Pacts, Oaths of Scarcity and Ancestral Vows. Not all poverty has its root in laziness or material error. There are forms of poverty that cannot be explained by ordinary means, that defy the logic of visible cause and effect. There are those with talent, virtue, and nobility who live surrounded by inexplicable economic limitations, as if a silent force prevented them from receiving. That force is not always external. Often it is a deep echo, an ancient commitment, a pact made beyond the reach of conscious memory, silent oaths, vows sealed with emotional or spiritual fire, invisible seals that tie the flow of abundance due to loyalty to ancestral programming. The ancients knew that the soul incarnates over and over, not only to evolve, but also to fulfill contracts made with others, with lineage, with ideas, with egregors, with archetypes. And among these contracts, the most powerful and dangerous are the invisible pacts related to money, pacts of scarcity, suffering, renunciation, atonement, made not out of malice, but out of ignorance, and often from misunderstood love. There are souls that in past lives took vows of poverty as part of monastic paths or initiatory journeys. They swore not to possess, not to desire, not to accumulate. Convinced that the material was an obstacle to spiritual awakening, they renounced gold not out of understanding, but out of fear of falling. In that time, such vows may have been necessary, but these vows, when not consciously dissolved, remain active centuries later. The soul, although now ready to manifest abundance from a new level of consciousness, is held back by a contract it itself signed in another time. Others made even deeper pacts, karma-compensating oaths for having abused economic power in a past life. They decided to incarnate without resources in the next life as a form of balance. This is not punishment, but rebalancing. Yet the soul, upon forgetting the reasons for this, experiences poverty as injustice, frustration, and stagnation. It does not realize that it itself sealed the doors of provision until the lesson is integrated. And there are also pacts that are not personal, but inherited from the family lineage. Generations who have lived in scarcity, transmitting a vibration of limitation that becomes a pattern. Children repeat unknowingly the beliefs of their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. Money is dirty, the rich are bad. Better poor but honest. Money corrupts. If you have a lot, something is wrong. These phrases, repeated with emotion and conviction, are etched into the energy field and become unconscious vows. Vows that not only affect the individual but the entire lineage, until someone, a more awakened soul, decides to break the chain, to break an invisible pact. It is not a matter of desire, it is a matter of awareness. First, one must recognize that it exists. The adept must observe their life with lucidity and ask, are there repeated patterns? Is there sabotage when abundance is about to arrive? Is there guilt in receiving? Is there fear of having too much? Is there unconscious loyalty to scarcity on the plan? If the answer is yes, it is not a matter of lack of ability or insufficient effort. It is an active oath that must be deactivated. Deactivation begins with deep forgiveness, not for the world, but for oneself, for the self that made that vow in another life, for the ancestor who transmitted their fear, for the monk who confused poverty with holiness, for the child who promised not to be like their wealthy and absent father. Each vow has an emotional root, and only by touching that root, by feeling it, by releasing it without judgment, can the possibility of rewriting the pact open. Then comes the act of conscious revocation. It is not enough to wish for another reality. The adept must declare from the deepest part of their being that they no longer need to hold that oath, that they understand they are no longer the one they were, that they can be prosperous without repeating abuse, that they can be free without betraying the lineage, that they can receive without corrupting themselves, that they can sustain abundance without losing their light. That declaration is not a simple affirmation. It is a magical act, a vibrational decree that breaks invisible structures that have been operating for centuries. And then something begins to change. The energy field reorders itself. The doors that were once sealed begin to open. The flow that seemed impossible begins to manifest, not as a sudden torrent, but as a subtle current gaining strength as the being proves they are ready. For the universe does not grant power to one who still fears having it, but when the soul no longer fears its own light, when it stops fleeing from its ability to create, eternal gold returns. It is not about accumulating, it is about restoring balance, allowing the divine flow to move without the hindrance of old pacts, replacing vows of scarcity with vows of service, expansion, and gratitude, taking the place of the conscious creator who no longer needs to suffer to learn, who no longer sacrifices joy in the name of a distorted ideal. The true initiate masters matter because they know it is not impure. It is sacred. Gold, properly understood, is a vehicle of the soul, not an obstacle. It is a stream of light, not a chain. And thus the one who breaks their invisible pacts begins to remember that they were never poor, that scarcity was a lesson, not a sentence, that the vows were necessary for a time, but that today they are no longer, that the time has come to walk as a rightful heir to the abundance of the universe. And in that instant, gold recognizes its rightful owner. Chapter 9. The Guardian of the Money Test on the Initiatic Path. Every true seeker of truth will face, at some point on their journey, a crossroads that cannot be avoided. There, between what is known and what has yet to awaken, between what has been conquered in the spirit and what still binds in form, a silent figure appears, sometimes invisible but immensely powerful. The guardian of the threshold is not a being with a defined face, nor a demon lurking in darkness, but a living mirror that reveals what still vibrates in discord with the light. And among all the forms this guardian adopts, one of the most complex, subtle, and dangerous is money. Yes, money, not as paper, not as a figure, nor as an object of desire, but as a symbol of condensed energy that reveals the true state of the soul. Because money, when it appears on the initiated's path, is neither a blessing nor a temptation, but an initiatic test. Its presence or absence alone does not speak. What matters is what it awakens in the consciousness. He who has not transcended their inner shadows will inevitably be unmasked by their relationship with gold, for money does not corrupt, it amplifies. When the aspirant approaches the threshold of higher knowledge, when they have begun to understand the invisible laws of the universe, and start to move energy with intention, power is granted to them. But power never comes without a test, and money is often the first one, not because it is impure, but because it is still deeply tied to the mental structures of the collective ego. In its vibration, greed, fear, vanity, pride, insecurity coexist, and when it comes into contact with the aspirant's field, it brings to the surface all that was hidden. Thus, money becomes an initiatic mirror. Some, after years of searching, begin to attract wealth. And then what they believed they had overcome, the need for approval, comparison, competition, resurges with renewed strength. Others, on the contrary, experience loss as part of their journey, and in the face of scarcity, victimism, complaint, resentment, and distrust in providence arise. In both cases, the test is the same. Can the soul remain centered, balanced, and whole beyond material flow? The guardian of the threshold does not seek to destroy the aspirant. It seeks to show them what they have yet to redeem, and money, in that sense, is one of its most effective tools, because it touches on the desire for control, the anxiety for the future, attachment to form, fear of loss, and the illusion of external security. Where there is a wound, money reveals it. Where there is a shadow, money exposes it. And only those who can look at their shadow without running from it, integrating it into the fire of consciousness, can cross the threshold and receive the next level of light. Many have fallen in this test. They have confused access to wealth with enlightenment. They believed that purchasing power was synonymous with spiritual fulfillment. They have used esoteric knowledge to manipulate forces without purifying their intention. They have turned money into an idol disguised as a tool. But there are also those who, when faced with the test, have chosen the straight path. They have used money not as an end, but as a channel. They have elevated their vibration to the point where gold no longer possesses them, but serves them. This is the true initiatic triumph, not renouncing money out of fear, nor seeking it out of desire, but holding it with purity, without losing sight of the spirit. The adept does not fear abundance, but neither do they need it to validate their power. They can have much or little, and in both cases they remain free, for they have conquered the guardian, not with force, but with truth, not by resisting, but by understanding. Then gold is no longer a test, it becomes a symbol. It turns into a docile energy in the hands of one who no longer vibrates in lack, desire, or guilt. The initiate who has crossed the threshold knows that money does not define their worth, that it does not grant identity, that it does not buy wisdom or real love. They know it is just another form of manifestation, and as all forms are, it is temporary. They do not pursue it, but neither do they reject it. They summon it when necessary, release it when its function is fulfilled. The guardian of the threshold does not disappear entirely, but its power diminishes as the soul strengthens. It returns occasionally with new masks, new tests, more refined forms, but each time it appears, the initiate recognizes it. They no longer fear it, they greet it as an old teacher, and with a silent smile, cross the threshold once again. For the true initiate is not defined by what they have, but by what they can train without losing themselves. And eternal gold, recognizing that vibration, flows toward them like the river flows to the sea, without resistance, without attachment, without struggle, only recognition. The guardian of the threshold has fulfilled its purpose, and the soul, now freer, prepares for the next door. Because on the path of the spirit, each conquest is not the end, but the beginning of a new dimension of responsibility. Chapter 10. Wealth without corruption. Prosper without losing the soul. Many have feared wealth not for what it is, but for what they have seen it can provoke. They have observed the powerful sink into arrogance, the rich harden their hearts, and the ambitious prostitute their principles to preserve their empire. And then they have confused cause with effect. They have believed that money corrupts, that abundance contaminates, that matter is the enemy of the spirit. In their fear, they have raised an altar to sacrifice, glorified scarcity as virtue, and venerated suffering as a sign of purity. Thus, vows of poverty were sealed, dogmas of scarcity perpetuated, and the false dichotomy between light and provision was created. But the wise soul does not fear abundance. It embraces it as part of the whole, not as egoic possession, but as a harmonious manifestation of the cosmic order. For true wealth is not sin, it is a test. It is not an obstacle, it is a mirror. It is not a trap, it is a portal. And what poisons is not gold itself, but the ego that gets lost in its reflection. Gold is neutral, eternal, silent. It reflects the face of the one who contemplates it. If the soul is aligned, gold becomes power. If the soul is asleep, gold enslaves it. That is why the key is not to renounce abundance, but to elevate the consciousness that holds it. To prosper without losing the soul is not impossible. It is the natural path of the being who has remembered its origin, who has purified its intentions, who no longer seeks to fill a void but manifests from fullness. Such a being can inhabit palaces without becoming a prisoner. They can manage great resources without losing their humility. They can have without being had. Corruption does not come from money. It comes from fear, fear of not having, fear of losing, fear of not being valuable without what is possessed. It is that fear that distorts, that leads the soul to justify deception, tolerate injustice, and betray itself little by little in the name of well-being. But when fear has been dissolved, when the being knows itself supported by the source, it no longer negotiates its integrity. Then wealth becomes the natural extension of the spirit, a channel for service, a silent blessing. The initiate who has walked the inner path does not seek wealth as an end, but neither does he shun it. He knows that the universe is generous with those who do not cling, and when abundance comes, he receives it with gratitude, manages it with wisdom, and gives it with discernment. He does not display it to feed his image, nor does he hoard it to control, nor does he fear it as a curse. He simply lets it be, a flow, a movement, an energy dancing with consciousness. The problem of the world is not that there is wealth, but that it has been disconnected from consciousness. It has separated from the soul, has become an end, a god, a measure of personal value. And from there, everything degrades because when money takes the place of the spirit, it becomes an idol, and every idol demands sacrifice. But the awakened soul does not sacrifice its light for any price. It does not sell its peace, rent its truth, or auction its integrity. It has discovered that true gold is inner, non-transferable, inexhaustible. How to prosper without losing the soul? By cultivating discernment, listening to silence before the crowd, making decisions from calm, not urgency, surrounding oneself with what nourishes, not what shines, serving life and not the ego, honoring abundance as divine manifestation, not a trophy of conquest. Knowing when to withdraw when gold demands a price that should not be paid, knowing when to renounce when the soul indicates it, knowing when to stay when everything flows in harmony. He who prospers from the spirit does not need to justify his success. His peace speaks for him. His generosity is not marketing, it is vibration. His wealth does not oppress or separate, it elevates. His presence leaves traces of clarity. He does not need to hide his abundance nor display it. He simply lives it, honors it, offers it. And if one day that wealth disappears, he does not crumble, for he knows that what made him rich was not what he had, but what he was capable of manifesting. And the ability to manifest is not lost with forms. It is eternal. It is fire that does not extinguish. Thus, to prosper without losing the soul is not an unattainable ideal. It is the natural destiny of the being who has chosen coherence as their compass, service as their path, and truth as their shield. Such a being does not fear gold because they have already conquered it within. They do not fear scarcity because they have already found the source. They do not fear mirrors because they already know their face. And then from that inner freedom, abundance arrives as an ally, not to inflate the ego but to expand the light, not to impress the world but to nourish it, not to fill a void but to share a spring. For the greatest wealth is the ability to hold abundance without ceasing to be light. Chapter 11, Financial Alchemy, Transmuting Need into Manifestation. At the heart of every esoteric tradition, alchemy has never been the simple fantasy of turning lead into gold, but rather the supreme art of transmuting the dense into the subtle, the coarse into the luminous, the limited into the eternal. Lead is nothing more than a symbol of ignorance, of the heaviness of the soul subjected to the world, and gold represents pure consciousness, reality freed from all illusion. But this same alchemical operation, so often projected onto metals, has its direct reflection in the economy of the spirit, the transmutation of need into manifestation, lack into provision, desire into conscious creation. We call this financial alchemy, that secret science not taught in profane temples or academic classrooms, for its laboratory is in the soul and its crucible is in the heart. It is not about manipulating money, but about elevating its vibration. It is not about conquering wealth, but about dissolving the I that fears lacking it. Need, when understood as a teacher and not as a condemnation, becomes the initiatory fire that purifies intention and reveals the true power of manifestation. For need is not the enemy. It is the starting point, the initial prompt, the sign that something in the soul is ready to be transformed. The error is not in needing, but in remaining there. When need is lived as a permanent state, it reinforces the identity of the lacking one, perpetuating the vibration of the cosmic beggar, the one who believes they must beg the universe for their needs, when in reality the universe awaits their command, not their plea. Every manifestation is not a response to a superficial desire, but to a deep vibration. And this vibration is calibrated, not by words, but by consciousness. He who desires to manifest abundance does not need more rituals. He needs more presence, for gold does not respond to cries, but to the silence of knowing. The universe does not move by anxiety, but by certainty. And certainty is born when the soul stops seeing itself as an empty vessel and begins to recognize itself as a source. Transmutation begins when the mind stops focusing on what is missing and starts contemplating what already is, not by naivete, but by wisdom. For like attracts like. The consciousness of lack can only attract more lack. The consciousness of sufficiency, even amid external emptiness, begins to invoke the corresponding form. This is not illusion, it is law, and the law is as precise as the fire that melts metals. The financial alchemist does not deny need, but does not feed it. He observes it, understands it as a warning, and then asks, "What part of me has forgotten that I am already everything I seek?" From there begins the internal operation. He does not act out of impulse, but from clarity. He does not react, but decrees. He does not demand, but summons, for he has understood that what he seeks outside only appears when it is fully embodied within. This alchemy does not require strange objects or ancient formulas. It requires coherence, that thought, emotion, and action be aligned, that what is visualized is not sabotaged by fear, that what is affirmed is not denied by doubt, that what is desired does not contradict the soul's purpose. Only then does desire become will, and will become manifestation. The alchemical fire that transforms need into abundance is gratitude, not the mechanical gratitude of repeating phrases, but the deep vibration of one who recognizes perfection, even amid apparent limitation. Gratitude because need revealed the crack. Gratitude because that crack opened the door. Gratitude because the soul has finally remembered that it is not here to suffer, but to create. And then something changes, not outside, but within. And this inner change begins to reorganize matter. What seemed distant draws near. What seemed impossible presents itself, not as a miracle, but as a consequence. For true alchemy does not produce magic. It produces law, and the law never fails. To prosper is to remember. To manifest is to vibrate. To abound is to be. Money does not come from solitary effort, but from internal symphony. And when the soul strikes the right note, the entire universe responds with harmony. Thus need becomes a teacher and manifestation becomes a natural result. For the alchemist no longer begs, he commands, for he remembers that he is the child of eternal fire, and that fire knows no lack, only creation. Chapter 12, The Lords of Supply, Spiritual Hierarchies of Material Flow. Few understand that behind every visible manifestation exists an invisible architecture, a web of conscious energies that, far from being random, obey laws as precise as they are sacred. Among these laws, one of the most veiled and yet most active in the everyday life of the human being is the one that governs material supply. For the flow of sustenance, gold, provision, and opportunity does not move by human whim or earthly logic, but is managed and guarded by spiritual hierarchies operating in levels of consciousness beyond ordinary perception. These higher intelligences, the ancient wise ones called them the Lords of Supply. They are not gods who grant favors nor genies who fulfill wishes. They are divine intelligences, conscious forces that sustain the energetic balance between giving and receiving in all planes of being. Their work is not to judge but to balance. They do not grant prizes, but facilitate the flow to those who vibrate in resonance with their law. They are guardians of cosmic order, ensuring that nothing is received before the right moment and that nothing is denied to one who has awakened the appropriate frequency within. These hierarchies cannot be manipulated with hollow prayers or rituals devoid of purity. They open when the soul reaches a certain level of alignment, when human will has been preserved for the greater purpose. For their function is not to enrich egos, but to sustain those who have remembered that true power is not in having, but in serving the whole from the heart of unity. Just as there are beings who guard time, karma, planetary evolution, and the elements, there are also guardians of supply, energies that channel, distribute, and restrict according to higher law. And these intelligences do not respond to emotional need or mental urgency, but to the vibration of the awakened soul. When a human being stops seeing themselves as lacking, when their heart opens to abundance, not to possess, but to share, when their mind is freed from fear and consecrated to balance, then the channel opens, and the lords of supply begin to act. These hierarchies are not far away. They exist in the subtle planes, in the energetic structure of the planet, in the very vital current that sustains nature. They are the ones who make the grain germinate, who cause the tree to bear fruit, who make the source spring forth. They are the ones who allow resources to appear at the exact moment, who send help when everything seems lost, who manifest opportunity where there was once a wall. Not because it has been asked for, but because the internal law that invokes it without words has been activated. The soul that desires to prosper must understand that abundance is a vibrational responsibility. It is not about accumulating more, but about becoming a worthy channel of distribution. For these hierarchies do not give supply to the one who demands the most, but to the one who can circulate energy without contaminating it. To do this, the being must purify their intentions, heal their relationship with giving and receiving, let go of the idea of deserving as judgment, and embrace the certainty that the source does not deny those who are in communion with it. The true one does not pray to be rich. They pray to be transparent, so that through them abundance flows without interruption, without retention, without diversion. For they know that anything that is stopped by fear begins to die, and that only the one who is an open channel can hold wealth without corrupting it, without clinging to it, without losing their essence. The lords of supply do not punish, but they stop the flow when they see that the soul has not yet understood. For giving before the right time is to harm, and receiving without awareness is to lose oneself. That is why not everything the ego desires is granted, and not all scarcity is rejection. Many times waiting is medicine, emptiness is sacred silence, and the pause is preparation. But when the soul has crossed the threshold of spiritual maturity, when it no longer asks from lack but affirms from unity, when it no longer demands but trusts, then the eternal supply activates, and what arrives is no longer simple money, possessions, or comfort, but the energy of divine sustenance in all its forms: peace, harmony, support, expansion, exact and perfect provision. It is then that the initiate understands that they were never alone, that the eternal gold was never denied to them, that everything was there the moment they became capable of sustaining it with a pure heart. And in that moment, the lords of supply, those invisible and luminous forces, open the seals, activate the channels, make the hidden wheels of the universe turn, not as a reward, but as a response. For abundance is not a privilege. It is a law, and like every sacred law, it waits to be revealed from within, not invoked from outside. And he who reveals it sustains it. And he who sustains it becomes a beacon, a portal, a living guardian of the eternal treasures. Chapter 13, The Art of Giving, the Mystery of Circulation and Return. Among the many secrets that the ancient temples guarded so jealously, few have been as distorted in their transmission to the profane world as the closed art of giving. What is today understood as generosity, often a superficial act, sometimes laden with guilt, duty, or calculation, is nothing but the shadow of a much deeper cosmic principle, the energetic circulation as the foundation of all sustained creation. For the universe does not function by accumulation, but by movement, and everything that does not circulate stagnates, densifies, and dies. The highest expression of giving is not a moral act. It is a spiritual law, an initiatory key, a portal through which energy, whether material, emotional, mental, or spiritual, can flow from the soul to the universe and return multiplied through the most unexpected paths. Eternal gold is not stored in vaults or intangible accounts. It is kept in the heart of the one who gives without losing themselves, who enters without expecting, who opens their hand without closing their soul. Humanity, trapped in the paradigm of fear and scarcity, has distorted this principle. It has been taught to give out of obligation or self-interest, without understanding that what matters is not what is given, but the energy from which it is given. A gift given with judgment, superiority, or expectations is not a seed of creation, but a disguised debt. Only what is given from freedom and joy returns with its vibration multiplied, and that return is as certain as the dawn after the night, for the energy given does not disappear. It rises, transforms, and finds its way back to the origin, not always in the expected form, not always from the same channel, but always with divine precision. He who has learned to give without resistance, without calculation or justification, has touched the secret rhythm of life. And in that rhythm, abundance becomes perpetual music, perpetual dance, a river that never dries up. But giving is not only material delivery, it is presence, it is listening, it is forgiveness, it is shared light. It is giving time without counting the minutes, giving attention without diverting the gaze, giving wisdom without expecting recognition. It is also giving what costs the most: detachment, patience, space. The soul that gives everything except what it fears to let go of has not yet understood the profound art of giving, for true giving is the surrender of the self. It is an alchemical act that disintegrates the ego and allows the divine to express itself through the gesture. That is why he who clings to what they give cuts off the flow. He who demands that the universe returns according to their measure closes the channel. He who gives only when they feel secure in what they will receive has not yet negotiated the art of giving. The art of giving requires radical trust, not in the world's response, but in the law itself, in the certainty that the universe never withholds what has been offered with purity, and that everything given from the light multiplies according to the vibration of the soul that has offered it. Giving does not impoverish. It enriches the one who gives even before the return manifests. For the soul that gives in the present vibrates in real abundance, even if it does not yet have everything it desires. Its frequency is no longer that of fear, but that of sufficiency. It no longer says, "When I have, I will give," but rather, "I give because I already am." And that act of giving from being, not from having, is one of the highest levels of spiritual manifestation. The universe responds not to what we say, but to what we sustain vibrationally. Giving is a vibrational declaration of trust, a declaration of cosmic identity. The great initiates knew that giving could not be limited by human laws, that there were no percentages, no fixed rules, no rituals that could replace the truth of the act. They knew that every time they gave from the soul, they invoked the wheel of return, and that this invisible but exact wheel would bring what was necessary when the time was right. That is why they never clung to what they possessed. They used it, they honored it, they shared it. They understood that wealth is not measured by what is kept, but by what flows through one. And here lies one of the greatest mysteries. He who becomes a pure channel of giving becomes the perfect magnet for receiving. For the universe does not give to the one who asks the most, but to the one who can circulate energy without distortion. Not as a reward, but as a law, not by moral merit, but by energetic resonance. The soul that has learned to give without resentment, without fear, without selfishness, has reached one of the highest keys of supply. But that key cannot be faked. It cannot be simulated with external acts if the heart is not aligned. Abundance does not respond to masks, it responds only to inner truth. That is why the art of giving is not learned from manuals or doctrines. It is revealed in direct experience, in the listening of the soul, in the silence of the one who offers without name or credit. And when giving comes from that sacred space, without interruption, without calculation, without fear, the universe responds as it only does to true creators, with perfect return, impeccable harmonies, and open paths where there were once walls. Not because it was demanded, but because the eternal dance of giving and receiving has been recognized, and this dance is the music of the worlds. Chapter 14. The Temples of Abundance, Energetic Centers and Ancient Codes. In the ancient civilizations that still vibrated to the rhythm of the cosmos, before gold was turned into a symbol of profane power rather than sacred illumination, there existed places where abundance was a living, conscious frequency, almost tangible. These were the temples of abundance, not just stone buildings, but energetic vortices where the archetypal codes of provision, fertility, and the perfect circulation of giving and receiving concentrated. In these sanctuaries, the wise did not worship money, luxury, or accumulation, but invoked the universal harmony of eternal supply, the principle that sustains everything from the sprouting of a seed to the movement of the stars. These temples, now mostly forgotten, destroyed, or desecrated, were centers of secret knowledge where it was taught that wealth should not be pursued but embodied, that it did not come from outside but from the internal activation of certain vibratory codes planted in the human soul since its earliest incarnations. These codes could be awakened, reactivated, and refined through spiritual work, conscious service, mental discipline, and the mastery of the will. In Egypt, the goddess Hathor represented beauty, abundance, and elevated pleasure, not as blind hedonism, but as a reflection of divine fullness. In India, Lakshmi symbolized not only gold, but the flow of vital energy that nourishes all. In Mesoamerican cultures, corn was considered sacred gold, an expression of the alliance between heaven and earth, food and spirit, which was to circulate without interruption. But beyond the external symbols, these temples were living circuits of energy. They were built upon precise points of the planet's energetic body, nodes where the telluric energy and cosmic energy intertwined like solar serpents. There, anyone who entered a state of alignment could experience abundance not as a concept, but as an internal frequency, as bodily certainty, as cellular vibration. Many of these places still exist, though veiled, waiting for pure souls to rediscover them, not to conquer them, but to honor them. Within these temples, the ancient priests and priestesses knew rituals that today we would call vibratory codes, sacred words, precise gestures, rhythmic breathing, astrological alignments, all designed not to invoke wealth as something external, but to remind the soul of its innate right to receive in harmony with the whole. For the imbalance in the flow of wealth does not come from malice, but from forgetfulness. These codes were not spells or superstitions. They were spiritual technology applied to the human soul. The modern adept, although not possessing a physical temple to go to, carries within them that same sacred space. The human body is also a temple of abundance, and each energy center is directly related to the flow of giving and receiving. When the heart is closed, love and provision cannot be received. When the solar plexus is blocked, power is feared, and creation is sabotaged. When the root center vibrates in fear, life becomes a struggle for survival. But when all of these centers are harmonized, the inner temple lights up, and abundance flows as a natural offering of the universe. In this time of awakening, many seek to return to those ancient codes. Some travel to sacred lands, others read forgotten scrolls and books, still others have visions in meditation that seem to belong to another time. But the secret is not in repeating ancient gestures like automatons. It is in recognizing the eternal principle that sustains those rituals, the consciousness unified with the flow. The soul that does not withhold, that does not fear, that does not beg, becomes a living temple. And from that temple, abundance springs forth like eternal water from an inner fountain. There are still guardians of these codes. They are not on thrones or pulpits. They are in humble hearts that have remembered how to honor gold, not by accumulating it, but by recognizing it. For where they walk, order blossoms. What they touch multiplies. Where they are, life circulates with more grace. Being a temple of abundance is not a privilege. It is the natural destiny of the soul that has remembered its origin, that has redeemed its past, and that no longer sees money as a goal, but as a messenger. The soul that does not fear having because it knows that having is sharing, and does not fear losing, because it knows that nothing can be taken from one who has embodied the principle of maternal return. Therefore, seek no longer gold in hidden vaults or secret formulas. Awaken the temple, activate the codes, purify the intention, and you will see how what the world calls wealth becomes something more subtle, more radiant, more permanent. The absolute certainty that you will always be sustained because you yourself have become a clean channel for the abundance of the universe. Chapter 15. The Conquest of the Inner Kingdom. being the pure channel of the divine treasure. Every search, if sincere, eventually turns inward. Every path that crosses deserts of desire, storms of scarcity, and illusions of possession ultimately leads to the one promised land that cannot be taken, the inner kingdom. There, deep within the being, where the external voices cease and the echo of the world no longer has power, lies the real source of all treasure. Not the treasure measured in gold or titles, but the eternal spring that sustains the entire universe and resides untouched at the center of the awakened soul. True abundance is not an external state. It is an emanation, a silent radiation that flows effortlessly from the being that has remembered its unity with the source. This being does not need to attract because it is living attraction. It does not need to ask because it emits a vibration of sufficiency. It does not strive to manifest because its very presence organizes the field. It is a channel, not an accumulator. It is a conduit, not a container. It is offering, not begging. But to reach that state of purity, the soul must conquer the many veils of the lower self. It must traverse ancestral fears, unconscious pacts, illusions of material power, and the traps of spiritual ego. It must renounce being the center of the story in order to become the transparent point through which the divine expresses itself without distortion. For only the one who has overcome the need to control, to hold on and to impress, can hold without harm the invisible gold of sacred provision. The conquest of the inner kingdom is not an act of force, it is an alchemy of surrender, a lucid, not passive, powerful, not submissive surrender. It requires that the personal self bow to the eternal self, not as a slave, but as a legitimate heir who recognizes that their greatest power is not in their name, history, or effort, but in their ability to be a clear channel. Becoming a pure channel does not mean emptying oneself of individuality, but aligning the individual with the universal purpose. It means allowing decisions, actions, thoughts, and even words to be aligned with the energy of the whole. It is to renounce the I want to embody the I am, not from negation, but from expansion. For the channel that is cleaned does not lose itself. It becomes infinite. And in that infinite, everything necessary arrives without delay, effort, or suffering. The pure channel does not ask when abundance will come because it lives in it. It does not worry about the future because it dwells in the frequency of the eternal present. It does not doubt its value because it has seen in its inner silence the face of the One. It knows that life will always support it because it has chosen to support life in every thought, gesture, and intention. This purity is not attained by external merit, but by coherence. The universe does not respond to appearances, but to vibration. And the vibrational channel that emits cleanliness, order, love, and detachment becomes the perfect instrument of the divine treasure. For the divine does not seek guardians who hide the gold, but bearers who distribute it in balance, who multiply it with justice, who transform it into peace, expansion, and service. The inner kingdom is not a place, it is a state. It is not a promise, it is present. And only when that kingdom has been conquered by the soul does everything else, wealth, relationships, purpose, creation, organize itself as if by spiritual gravity. For the soul that reigns within does not need to dominate outside. And the universe lovingly surrenders to the one who no longer needs anything to know that they are everything. Thus ends this journey, not at the peak of the external mountain, but in the heart of the invisible temple, not with a throne, but with a silence filled with light, not with gold in the hands, but with certainty in the soul. For the one who has conquered their inner kingdom no longer seeks, no longer desires, no longer asks. And in that knowing, the divine treasure flows incessantly through them for the good of all worlds.